This fight might be one we're sleeping on, or even falling asleep too, because it has the potential to be uneventful. Here's why. Tagir's main game plan is similar to his teammate and legendary fighter Khabib Nurmagomedov's, relying heavily on the lay-and-pray strategy. However, Tagir has recently shown flashes of channeling his inner Islam Makhachev by securing back-to-back submissions, which makes me think this fight might not be as boring as it sounds. On the other hand, Carpenter is all about aggression. He likes to get in his opponent's face from the opening bell and stay there until the fight is over. This makes things tough for Tagir, whose striking favors a slower, more technical pace. Grappling-wise, Tagir likes to take his time, working for a submission or maintaining control, rather than engaging in scrambles. Now, here's the kicker. Carpenter has good hands and solid jiu-jitsu, but we've seen his takedown defense falter. Against Chairez, he struggled to defend takedowns, often resorting to guillotine attempts instead of proper defense. This is something we frequently see with fighters who lack high-level wrestling skills. However, Carpenter's wrestling did improve in the latter half of that fight, and it was his relentless aggression and wrestling that ultimately earned him the win. That said, I believe there's still a noticeable gap between his wrestling and Tagir's, and this is where I see Tagir having a clear path to victory. I think Carpenter's aggression might work against him here. He tends to fight fire with fire, which could be a product of his style, mindset, or inexperience. He's only 8-0 and still has plenty of room to grow. I see Tagir handling Carpenter's aggression by maintaining distance on the back foot, waiting for Carpenter to overextend and make mistakes, which will open up opportunities for takedowns. Now, while Carpenter won't be easy to hold down and will likely stay active off his back, I feel his tendency to chase submissions, like guillotines, instead of focusing on control and defense could be his undoing. He also leaves his chin exposed when he darts into range, something we saw repeatedly against Chairez. In that fight, Chairez even knocked him down and landed significant damage, so it wouldn't shock me if Carpenter runs into something here. While Tagir isn't known for his power, Carpenter's reckless entries could leave him vulnerable to getting caught before Tagir shoots for a takedown. For these reasons, I'm picking Tagir to win. I see him either grinding out a clear decision in a tough, competitive fight or securing a submission once Carpenter makes a mistake on the ground. While a ground and pound finish from either man is possible, I feel the most likely outcome is Tagir winning via one of the two scenarios I've mentioned. So, my pick is Tagir. I really hope we finally get to see this fight happen, especially since it's been rescheduled for at least 2 cards now. After reviewing it thoroughly, the result seems pretty clear to me, so I'll keep this breakdown brief. I believe Bernardo Sopaj outclasses Ricky Turcios in every aspect of the game. Frankly, I don't see any area where Ricky can secure a win here. That's why I'm confident Bernardo Sopaj is a lockpick on this card. I fully expect him to dominate Turcios and deliver a one-sided beatdown. Turcios' defense is practically non-existent. He often establishes range so poorly that it's like he can't even see his opponent. On top of that, he doesn't offer much in his fights besides shouting "ha." Though, to his credit, he's toned that down recently. However, he hasn't added anything significant to his game that would change the outcome of this matchup. My prediction is that Bernardo Sopaj will punish Turcios until the referee steps in to stop the fight or cruise to a dominant 30-27 decision victory. One thing Turcios does have is toughness, but Sopaj has likely learned from his previous loss where he gassed out from pushing too hard. This time, Sopaj should pace himself better, and with Turcios unlikely to force a faster pace, Sopaj will control the range and tempo with ease. In short, I'm picking Bernardo Sopaj to get his hand raised. If you've watched Rinya Nakamura, you know he's relentless when it comes to applying pressure, no matter where the fight takes place. On the feet, he'll be the one pushing forward, utilizing his superior hands and effectively mixing in kicks to keep Gafurov at the end of his strikes. This pressure-based style will force Gafurov to stay on the defensive. However, Gafurov does have opportunities to counter, as Nakamura's forward movement often leaves openings. He has a tendency to drop his hands while relying heavily on his chin and toughness to absorb damage. If Gafurov can capitalize on this, he might land something significant and give Nakamura some problems. That said, I believe Nakamura's ability to mix in his grappling will make the difference. Early on, Gafurov's cardio should hold up, but as the fight progresses, I see fatigue becoming a factor. Once that happens, Gafurov is likely to be more vulnerable, especially to being controlled on the ground and possibly accepting bottom position. We saw this in Gafurov's last fight against Kang, who managed to take him down and dominate him as the pace wore him out. Nakamura, being a stronger and more aggressive grappler than Kang, is likely to exploit these same weaknesses, but much earlier in the fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Nakamura secures a submission against a gassed Gafurov in the later rounds. If not, he should be able to earn a clear decision win. That said, if the fight turns into a slugfest, Nakamura could very well knock Gafurov out. Either way, I believe Nakamura has the edge, no matter where the fight goes. I call this one the Battle of the Peaches. If you've watched both fighters, you'll understand why. As most of us know, women's MMA fights tend to go the distance. Over 80% of them did just that last year alone. I wouldn't count on this fight breaking that trend, as both women are likely to rely heavily on grappling and control. Rosa has some decent stand-up skills, and Pérez has made some improvements in that area too. But I expect this fight to be a grappling showcase. In such matchups, I give the edge to Pérez over Rosa. Rosa has solid grappling and jiu-jitsu, but like many Brazilians, she lacks strong wrestling. Pérez is bread and butter. This feels like a classic jiu-jitsu versus wrestler battle, and more often than not, the wrestler comes out on top. My pick is Pérez to win via a dominant decision, controlling Rosa while pushing for a finish whenever the opportunity arises. That said, Rosa's grappling is impressive, so don't be surprised if she makes it competitive and avoids being finished. Still, Pérez is my pick here. Grant Dawson v Carlos Diego Ferreira. Carlos Diego Ferreira has been on an impressive run lately, racking up some notable wins, including a recent stoppage of Rebecca, a highly regarded wrestler and grappler. In his next bout, Ferreira faces yet another elite wrestler-grappler in Grant Dawson, who has also been building momentum heading into this fight. Dawson is coming off a setback against Bobby Green, which temporarily derailed his rise. However, he's eager to regain his footing in the division and get back into contention with a win here. It won't be an easy task though. Despite nearing 40, Ferreira appears to have found a second wind in his career, consistently showing subtle improvements with each performance. This makes him a formidable challenge for Dawson. Ferreira is known for being highly active off his back, which could make it difficult for Dawson to maintain control even if he manages to secure takedowns. As a result, Dawson may need to rely on his striking more in this fight, which could be risky. Ferreira is the sharper striker of the two, and he has legitimate power. If he lands cleanly, Dawson's chin could be tested again, and if that happens, his wrestling alone might not be enough to keep him in the fight. That said, Dawson's relentless pace could wear Ferreira down and force him to accept unfavorable positions, giving Dawson a significant edge in a grueling contest. My pick is Dawson to win via a hard-fought decision, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ferreira delivers another highlight reel finish by turning the lights out once more. This fight presents a unique clash of styles. Bogdan Guskov, an aggressive yet calculated fighter, doesn't operate like your typical aggressor. He fights from the back foot, keeping his arms down and staying mobile to catch opponents off guard and land clean shots when the timing and range are right. On the other hand, Billy Elekana also tends to fight on the back foot, looking to trap opponents and use their aggression against them. This blend of styles could lead to a lackluster, counter-heavy fight where neither fighter gives the other an opening. These types of fights often end up stagnant and boring, which is a real possibility here. However, both fighters are known to stand their ground once the exchanges heat up, so there is potential for an exciting brawl. That said, I'm not thrilled by this fight, especially as a replacement for Johnny Walker, who would have provided a more dynamic challenge for Guskov. Regardless, I'm picking Guskov to win. He's likely to throw and land more strikes, as Elekana tends to be low volume. Both fighters can crack, but I expect them to land at will, making the strike stats close. Given their styles, this fight will probably go to the judges, with Guskov's more active offense likely giving him the edge in significant strikes. I'd call this fight a mismatch, but not necessarily from a skill perspective. It's more about Barcelos being nearly 40 years old, having taken significant damage throughout his career, and starting to show signs of slowing down. While he still has flashes of brilliance, competing as a bantamweight at his age is far from ideal. Now, he's up against a young, highly talented prospect in Payton Talbott, a fighter with all the makings of a dangerous contender. This matchup feels like a foregone conclusion, and the odds reflect it clearly, with Payton being the biggest favorite on the card. I usually try to stay unbiased and assess fights objectively before making predictions, but in this case, it's hard to argue with the bias favoring Payton Talbott. I fully expect Payton to dominate Barcelos and deliver a serious beating before finishing him. My prediction is that the finish will come in the second or third round. However, if Payton targets the body early with lethal strikes before transitioning to headshots, I could see him ending the fight within the first 5 minutes. That said, Payton tends to be a pressure fighter who systematically breaks down his opponents, and considering Barcelos' toughness, I think the fight is likely to make it out of the first round, though an earlier finish isn't out of the question. One key vulnerability Barcelos has shown in the past is his susceptibility to body shots. While his core isn't as weak as someone like Michal Aleksiejczuk, it's still a noticeable target that Payton can exploit to break him down faster. Being the sniper that he is, Payton might zero in on this weakness and land more strikes to the body. My pick is Payton Talbott to finish Barcelos inside the distance, possibly with a body shot as the decisive factor. However, with Barcelos' worn-out chin, a clean head strike could just as easily get the job done. Still, I'm banking on a body shot being the major cause of the stoppage. To kick off the main event, we have an unusual matchup that could either turn out to be pointless or highly entertaining, depending on how the fighters' styles interact. On one side, we have Kevin Holland, whose primary goal will be to land enough clean shots to turn the lights out on RDR. On the other, RDR will aim to take the fight to the ground and showcase his superior grappling skills. While that sounds straightforward, I foresee a thrilling yet awkward striking exchange. RDR's striking style is unconventional, reminiscent of the champion, Dricus du Plessis, and this could throw Holland off his game. Unlike the more predictable strikers Holland usually faces, RDR's awkward patterns might make it harder for Holland to land a clean KO shot. In fact, I think RDR could pose challenges for Holland not just on the ground but also on the feet. As the fight progresses, I believe Holland's tendency to overreach and overcommit will play right into RDR's hands. This will likely allow RDR to time his takedowns effectively and bring the fight to the ground, where he holds a clear advantage. Although Holland has decent grappling skills, I see him being outclassed here. Once Holland finds himself stuck on the ground and unable to get back up, I suspect we'll see a familiar pattern. He'll mentally check out, as he has in past fights when put in similar situations. At that point, Holland may simply accept being on the bottom, defending just enough until he can no longer hold off RDR's submission attempts. If Holland ends up in this scenario, I see two likely outcomes. Either RDR secures a submission victory, possibly in the third round, or dominates on the ground en route to a clear unanimous decision win. My prediction? RDR wins via submission or a landslide decision. Now we move on to the only heavyweight fight on the card. And you'd expect heavyweight equals knockout, right? Not quite. These two have proven that not all heavyweights possess one-punch, fight-ending power. Instead, they make up for it with elite grappling skills, and I expect that to be the deciding factor here. Yes, every fight starts on the feet, but with these two, I don't see it staying there for long. In fact, I anticipate the first takedown attempt to come within the opening 2 minutes. Jailton Almeida, who thrives on taking opponents to the ground and dominating with his grappling, will undoubtedly look to implement the same strategy against Sergey Spivac's. That's essentially his entire game plan. On the other hand, Spivac's will likely aim for takedowns of his own, but between the two, he appears more comfortable on the feet. This could make a difference if Spivac's can keep Almeida on his back foot, pressuring him with strikes. Grapplers like Almeida struggle when forced to retreat. However, even in that scenario, I expect Almeida to relentlessly shoot for takedowns and eventually succeed. Spivac's takedown defense isn't the strongest, and he has difficulty getting back to his feet once taken down. While both men share this weakness, Almeida is far more aggressive and persistent in his wrestling approach. I see Almeida's pressure working in his favor here. While Spivac's may initially defend the takedowns, I expect him to falter eventually, and that could be the turning point. Once Almeida secures top position, he will make Spivac's work tirelessly to defend while relentlessly hunting for a finish. Whether it's through a submission or ground and pound, Almeida's control and aggression will likely overwhelm Spivac's. Ultimately, I'm leaning toward Jailton Almeida to secure a takedown within the first round and finish Spivac's shortly after, either by submission or TKO. Spivac's will need to weather an early storm to have any chance of turning the tide, but I see Almeida getting the job done early. I feel this fight has been a long time coming, and both fighters have played a crucial role in elevating each other's careers without many people realizing it. Consider this: Hill was ranked number 7 and nearing a title shot, but he wasn't next in line just yet. Yuri Prochazka's injury and subsequent withdrawal from the Glover-Teixeira rematch created an opening that allowed Hill to step in. Hill seized the moment, defeating Glover and becoming champion when others couldn't step up. Both fighters eventually lost to Alex Pereira, but the context of their losses is significant. Yuri was 100% healthy yet put in a disappointing performance. Meanwhile, Hill lost largely due to his terrible physical condition. He came in injured, with no camp, and on short notice. Under such circumstances, it's hard to imagine anyone faring well against Pereira. If Hill were fully prepared, I believe he would have performed far better. Now, Hill may get his chance to fight Alex at 100%, but first, he must get past Yuri, a fighter who, once again, may indirectly grant Hill another shot at the title. If Hill comes in as focused and prepared as he was against Glover, I believe Yuri will lose, likely by stoppage. Yuri's unorthodox striking style, while unique, can often work against him. Unlike fighters such as Dricus du Plessis or Robert Whittaker, Yuri's wild and chaotic approach leaves openings. A patient opponent can exploit those gaps. This is where Hill's strengths come into play. His sharp inside boxing, respectable punching power, and solid fight IQ, when he's in the zone, are exactly the tools needed to expose Yuri's defensive weaknesses. Yuri's lack of defensive fundamentals and reliance on toughness could prove to be his undoing if Hill shows up at his best. However, there is a caveat. Hill has shown lingering issues with controlling his emotions, a problem we thought he had moved past after his loss to Paul Craig. Fans and opponents alike have managed to rattle him, and this emotional volatility could work in Yuri's favor. If Hill gets drawn into trying to match Yuri's aggression, he could make costly mistakes, opening himself up to Yuri's power strikes. This emotional factor is what makes this fight so close and harder to predict than it might seem. Ultimately, I'm leaning toward Hill. I think he has the tools to capitalize on Yuri's poor defense and chaotic style, either securing a knockout or a clear decision victory. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Hill's emotions get the better of him, leading to him being overly aggressive and walking into one of Yuri's power shots, resulting in a knockout loss. This is probably the best fight on the card in terms of skill, second only to the main event. In terms of entertainment, drama, and hype, it's easily the standout. The champion, Merab Dvalishvili, takes on the highly touted but arguably undeserving challenger, Umar Nurmagomedov. How do I see this fight playing out? I think Umar capitalizes on his momentum and pulls off the win. Merab Dvalishvili is no easy opponent. He's a relentless competitor and a tough matchup for anyone in the division, including Umar. Stylistically, Merab might be Umar's most challenging fight to date. His incredible pace, top-tier wrestling, and grappling will push Umar to his limits and answer many questions about Umar's true potential. Umar hasn't faced anyone as relentless or well-rounded as Merab. The closest comparison might be Sergey Morozov, who gave Umar some trouble in their fight, but Merab is a significantly better and more complete fighter than Morozov. Additionally, Umar's relative inexperience at this level, especially in 5-round fights, is worth noting. While he's excelled against opponents lacking strong wrestling, his signs of fatigue against Corey Sandhagen showed that mixing in his grappling saved him. Against Merab, who won't fear Umar's wrestling and will pressure him constantly, we'll see how Umar handles adversity. On the other hand, Merab faces a versatile striker and well-rounded fighter in Umar. Umar's ability to move in and out of range effectively could pose issues for Merab, making it difficult for him to land cleanly. This movement might also set up Merab's takedowns, but Umar likely has answers for those as well. Umar's kicks and boxing could allow him to outstrike Merab, especially if Merab gets too close. However, this approach could leave Umar vulnerable to takedowns, making this fight razor close. Conditioning might become the deciding factor, which favors Merab. If Umar can manage Merab's pace for at least 4 rounds, and I believe he can, I see him edging out a very close decision to become the new champion. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if Umar wilts under Merab's relentless pressure. Even in such a scenario, Merab might struggle to land the clean strikes needed to finish the fight. While Umar's style leaves his midsection open, Merab's lack of kicking and difficulty closing range could make it hard for him to exploit this. If Merab can trap Umar and consistently land body strikes, he could slow Umar down and potentially overwhelm him. However, I don't see that happening here. My pick is Umar by decision. One additional note, Merab's neck tends to be exposed during takedowns and scrambles. If he doesn't tighten up in this area, Umar could take advantage with a front choke, similar to what Ricky Simón managed. We lost the highly anticipated rematch between Islam and Arman due to an injury that Arman sustained just a day before the fight. This raises questions about the legitimacy of the injury, especially since Islam mentioned trying to book the fight before his matchup with Poirier, but Arman reportedly declined. Arman then fought Charles Oliveira and called out Islam, only to pull out of this fight at the last minute. So, the question remains, will we ever see Arman fight Islam, or does he lack the confidence to take the fight, fearing another loss? This is now the second time in less than a year that Arman has either refused or failed to show up, which raises some concerns. As for the replacement fight, we now have Islam Makhachev facing Money Moicano, who claimed he would make championship weight if needed, and here we are. Moicano is a smart opportunist, always ready to step in, but both fighters now have less than a day to adjust to an unexpected opponent. With little time for preparation, both will likely fall back on their usual styles, relying on their understanding of each other's game. For Islam, the key will be his wrestling, which he'll likely use early on. The striking dynamics have shifted, as Moicano, being taller, presents a different challenge on the feet compared to Arman, who is shorter. Islam won't have the range he's accustomed to controlling and could be vulnerable to strikes if he makes mistakes at range. Moicano isn't the hardest hitter in the division, but I believe he can still hurt Islam. That said, I'm picking Islam to win. I believe he'll rely on his wrestling to control the fight and secure a decision if he can't finish Moicano on the ground.